Welcome back to another episode of Technology for Independence with Christopher Cooley. Today, Christopher is going to be talking with Brandon Vera, who's going to be talking about disability AMC. So stay tuned. Welcome back to another episode of Technology for Independence with Christopher Cooley. Christopher Cooley is a Ohio Tech ambassador in the state of Ohio. And today he has an interesting guest, Brandon Vera. And tell us a little bit about Brandon, Chris.
I saw Brandon on another social media site talking about his disabilities and his independence and different things about his condition, AMC. Every year in June on the 30th is AMC Awareness Day, and everybody wears blue to celebrate and bring awareness to that type of disability. I'm going to let Brandon tell us a little bit about himself and his disability with AMC and how he lives independently and being able to get out there and do things without allowing it. I'm going to let Brandon talk a little bit about his disabilities and how he lives independently and how he overcomes obstacles that may be in the way. I know this disability can cause a lot of problems in some folks. Upon seeing Brandon and hearing him telling his story, I really wanted to reach out and be like, hey, do you want to be a guest? And he said yes. And so here we are today with Brandon, and I would turn it over to him and tell us a little bit about yourself. Tell us, about your disabilities, how you overcome and live independently.
Yeah, thank you all for having me here today. So my name is Brandon, and I share a lot about my disability on TikTok, just how I navigate through life and that sort of thing. And specifically, my disability is called Arthrogryposis multiplex congenita, and for short, AMC, as it's abbreviated. I specifically have the disability called amyoplasia, which is kind of like a subcategory of arthrogryposis. And basically what it means is that my joints are very stiff, so I don't necessarily have the flexibility or bend in my knees and my elbows. I was also born with club feet as well as clubbed hands. So growing up as a kid, I've gone through a pretty good amount of surgeries to help with restructuring some of the bones, which have helped me walk. And through a lot of physical therapy, I've been able to achieve some flexibility, not full flexibility, but enough to help me with mobility and becoming close to full independence. There are a couple of things that are hard to do, but overall, I've been able to live life to the fullest. And of course, having a disability is not easy. I think a lot of people forget that disability is not only concerning the physical aspects, but also the emotional and psychological aspects of it too. I think with disability, there's this portion of life where you're concerned about how do you obtain independence, how do you navigate mobility, but also the process of how do you self-identify, how do you tell people about your disability, how do you remain confident and persevere through a lot of those obstacles. So I would say through my 30 years of life, I had to figure out and conceptualize, how do I figure out how to navigate the world the best that I can, and how do I communicate about my life in a way that's in a way that can motivate other people, but also show them that I'm also human at the end of the day, that, you know, I deserve to take up space in the world. I deserve to live life to the fullest. I deserve to be in all spaces of things. I've grown up in a family who has supported me through so many things. I've achieved my bachelor's degree and my master's degrees. I learned how to play piano independently. I love to sing and make music, and I currently work in marketing. So there's just a little bit about me.
When you say that you have AMC, what kind of physical limitations do you see on a daily basis?
One obstacle I usually face are stairs or staircases. So because my knees do not fully bend, it's hard to walk up each stair or staircase. So I usually would have to use like an elevator or even a ramp, those sort of things. I can walk up and down steps. It just takes me a longer time compared to an able-bodied person. But it's usually a little more dangerous because I can lose my balance a little bit quickly. So I would say stairs are my usual obstacle. And probably another obstacle or a difficult circumstance is putting on certain types of clothing. For example, if a jacket is kind of tight, I do need some assistance with that. Maybe some button-down shirts. Some buttons are kind of hard for me to fasten. So I have to find clothing that's a bit more accessible for me and my abilities, which I've been able to find. And I think today the fashion industry is recognizing a lot of more adaptive styles, and I'm hoping they continue to do that.
I would imagine that in school, grade school, high school, colleges, there are a lot of stairs. There are a lot of steps. I know in my high school, we had 3 stories, but there was no elevators. And our classes were usually all throughout the building. So how were you able to survive situations like that?
Yeah, that's a great question. I actually have a story for that opened up my eyes once I started that collegiate venture. So when I was applying to colleges, I had one dream school that I really wanted to go to, but it is a historical, an older school that has a lot of history to it. And oftentimes, a lot of institutions or buildings or even homes, um, they often want to protect the historical integrity, so they don't necessarily modify a lot of the buildings or modify the landscaping of the campus, which to a point I understand, but at the same time, I think complying with ADA, with the Americans with Disabilities Act, is very important too. And there are ways to modify and accommodate, you know, the disability population without affecting the historical integrity of the landscape or buildings and that sort of thing. But this one college that I did get accepted into, a lot of the buildings weren't accessible because of staircases, because of um, even the landscape of the campus is very hilly. The landscape wasn't even. There was a lot of uneven pavement and that sort of thing. So it just posed a huge hazard for me. So through my college research and just visiting the campuses, I found one college that their campus was pretty accessible to me. They had newer buildings that had elevators, and there were staircases, but there was always a point of access for me that allowed me to enter those buildings. So I think because of the standard of accessibility on that campus, I chose that one instead of the more historical, older campus that I really wanted to go to. So it was more of me experiencing the campus and kind of testing out if I had a class in a couple of buildings around here, could I get into each building quickly and um, to to wherever I needed to go. So after testing out a couple of campuses, I was able to pick one that fit all of my needs, and I was able to thrive, and I think a lot of colleges these days are offering online programs too. So when I started my master's degree, it was fully online. So I was able to do it remotely, and that opened up a lot of doors for me. And I really appreciate that the world is recognizing remote work and remote education, just because it opens doors for a lot of people, especially the disabled people who aren't able to physically be in person in classes and that sort of thing. So for me, it was just mostly research and trying to experience each campus. Thankfully, I was with my parents who could, help me if I needed. But thankfully, the school that I went to, I was able to go independently. I also drive myself, so I was able to commute there and enjoy the college life.
What about high school?
Yeah, my high school, it was a newer high school, so there were staircases, but I always had an elevator to
No.
use. It was only 2 stories, so um, I used the elevator whenever I had a class on the second floor. But otherwise, my guidance counselor would help me adjust the schedule if needed, just to make sure that my classes weren't too far, or if I had a class on the second floor, I had enough time to go to it. But overall, I would usually go to the disability services office just to ensure that I was given enough time, or like a 15 or 10-minute grace period to make it to the class if I was running late. But they worked with me, and I was able to communicate what I needed.
So I know that a lot of individuals with this disability being able to lift a lot of things. So a minute ago, I heard you talk about, something with tight. You had to get some help to be able to get it on or modify it to get it on. What kind of modification do you use at home to be independently without having to have somebody in your home 24/7?
It's a mixture of finding adaptive clothing, for example, if it's Velcro or if it has like a magnetic closure, that sort of thing. Or I usually like getting jackets that are kind of smooth, or kind of like, I don't know the exact material. If you picture like a raincoat, it's usually kind of like not slippery, but you can slide in really quickly, that sort of material. Um, so I kind of have to think about what material the clothing is made out of, because if it's, for example, if I'm wearing a cotton sweater and I'm trying to put on a cotton jacket on or a jacket made out of cotton, there's a lot of friction there. So I have to find something that is frictionless. So I usually buy clothing that fits my needs as opposed to modifying so much, because I think another point I'd like to make is that adaptive clothing is not always affordable. Modifying clothing is not always affordable. So I have to kind of think with a financial mind too, and think about, hey, I really like this, but it's not fitting my needs. I shouldn't buy it. So I try to find clothing that fits my needs. I try to find adaptive clothing that's affordable. But um, as of right now, I don't have the luxury of always modifying my clothing. But if I can find it already modified, then I usually have that.
Let's say you want to cook dinner and lunch. Do you have to modify anything in your kitchen? Do you have anybody coming in to help you with any of that kind of things and cleaning the house? I know that, being visually impaired, cleaning my house, I feel like it's always dirty, but I can't see it. So I just try to clean as best as I can. So do you have any modifications in your kitchen or anywhere else in your home that you feel like that, someone out there is, I want to be independent, but I'm scared. I don't know how I'm going to do it. Or maybe parents maybe don't want to let their kids go because they're scared that they won't be able to do those very things on their own independently.
Growing up, when I was pursuing my master's degree, my mom and I had a talk about my independence and what that would look like. And she actually pushed me to be independent and said, hey, let's try it out where you live on your own. And if obviously, if you need anything modified, we will do it. But she kind of wanted me to figure out if I could see if I could figure out a way to do the things that I needed to do. I moved out when I was like in my grad school, and I was so surprised at how much I could do with just. I didn't necessarily have too many modifications. It was more about changing the way I did certain things. So, like for example, me putting on clothes, it probably doesn't look like the way an able-bodied person can put on clothes, but I'm able to achieve it in like certain with certain movements and that sort of thing. The the modification that I needed in my house was how high certain things were. So, for example, like a microwave. Some houses have microwaves that are like a little bit higher above the stove. I ended up buying a separate microwave that was lower and that I could reach. And it was more about because my physical disability is more on the mild side as opposed to being more severe. I had to think about how heavy things were, so buying plates that weren't so heavy, having things that were lower and not so out of reach for me, like doing laundry, just making sure that the machines weren't too high for me either. So for me, it's more of about a height thing and a weight thing, making sure that all the things that I needed in my household weren't too heavy. One, they weren't out of reach. And if they were, we would have to figure out how to get certain things lower and how to make it so it wasn't out of reach for me. And for cooking, I'm a horrible cook. And that's just like, I just don't have the skill set for that. So I usually just like bought food or I would have certain things that I could do that were like microwavable. So I would say the microwave kind of saved my life often.
What about driving? Is that a difficult thing? Because you have to pull the gear shift down and touch the pedals and things like that. Was that difficult?
Oh, good question. That was something that I thought was going to be difficult in the beginning, but I'm able to use my car without any sort of modifications. The only thing that I wish I could modify about my car, or I just haven't gone around to it yet or gotten a quote, was the portion of the car where you put gas in. So usually if I go to a gas station by myself, I do have to ask for assistance to open up like the gas cap and that sort of thing because it's a little bit hard. Um, I haven't gotten around to seeing what kind of modifications exist for that, but I'm sure like there are. I just haven't gotten around to it. But I usually go to a gas station. I have to go inside and ask for someone to help me or assist me with the gas. And I think that's probably an uncomfortable moment for me just because I like to feel or I like to show that I am an independent person, but there are times where I have to ask for assistance with certain things. But I'm trying to get to a point where I want to normalize asking for help where it doesn't mean that asking for help means I can't be independent. But I think we all ask for help at some point in our lives.
Do you feel people are accepting of you as a disabled individual?
I feel like that's a a difficult thing to answer sometimes. Once people start getting to know me, they often rid their stigmas or assumptions about disability because I think I'm able to communicate my experience and show them how I personally navigate life. So they have more of an understanding that disability affects people very differently, and again, I'm just one depiction of what disability looks like. Um, but I think it helps opens their minds to disability. On the other hand, I think where I've encountered a little more hostility or maybe closed-mindedness is in the dating world. So me venturing out into dating and love and relationship, I find that a lot of people are quick to judge, and I understand that dating, it involves like physical attraction and often seeing someone's profile picture before proceed with a date. So I've found a lot more judgment on dating apps and that sort of thing, where when people find out that I have a disability, they often are a little more avoidant and a little more maybe intimidated by disability and what that entails, just because they are not asking questions. And when people are unfamiliar with something, they're either fearful of it or sometimes they avoid it instead of actually like challenging and questioning and inquiring about it.
Do you think it's a fear that, being in a dating scene, wanting to go on a date with someone, it's a fear that they're going to have to be your aid that whole time, going to have to help you that whole time? I know that the biggest fear in a lot of people with disability, even myself, not being able to hear and see very well, that's kind of a struggle sometimes. So do you think that it's just a fear when they see you as with your disability, be like, I'll have to take care of them the rest of my life. I'm not going to do it.
Yeah, I've been told that sentiment, or people have conveyed that sentiment pretty often, where they I think kind of confuse the lines between you're in a relationship with someone and you care with them and you care for them, and being a caretaker. Able-bodied people forget that disability can happen at any point in life. And I think it's important to remember to empathize with people who are born with disabilities. It's something that, I never experienced midlife, but disability can happen to anyone at any point in life. And we all need to be taken care of at some point, because we're not going to be able to, be self-reliant as we are when we're younger, or if we don't have a disability. So I like to, when someone shares that sentiment with me of, oh, I'm scared of being a caretaker, well, I often say, chronic illness can happen at any point. Disease can happen. Injury can happen, which can, result in a disability. And I think it's in that moment, someone is going to realize, oh, now I'm the one who needs help, and help doesn't mean that rids you of your autonomy or your independence. Obviously, we all need help at some point, but at the same time, a relationship doesn't mean that somebody is going to be my caretaker. If someone is pursuing a relationship with someone with a disability, I think it's important to communicate, the boundaries between, hey, in these instances, I just want to feel like your partner. And in these other instances, this is a limitation of mine. I do need help, but I think there has to be communication about what is the line between two of those roles if a person with a disability needs more help in certain instances. But confusing those roles within a relationship, I think that's where it creates the fear. That's where it creates the difficulty in, for an able-bodied person to pursue a relationship with a person with a disability.
How about at work? Are you completely accepted by your coworkers?
Yeah. So I've been in a couple of different work environments. So specifically, I've worked in a school or a university as an academic advisor, and I was able to receive any accommodation that I needed. I've also worked remotely too, so that has been a really great help too, where I didn't have to like commute to somewhere. I could just work online. But being in an office, I was able to get any sort of accommodation, for example, like a chair modification if I needed it to be higher, or a different chair, or any sort of like ergonomic keyboards and that sort of thing. So I didn't necessarily face any sort of discrimination or discomfort with my disability. It was just mostly modifying my environment to ensure that I can complete the job.
Did you find that when you were interviewing for jobs, that you could tell you weren't going to get the job because of your disability?
That's a great question. I think one interview that comes to mind, it was a customer service position. And after doing the whole interview, and I think the interviewer noticed my hands, because I have curved hands. I think there was a question about my ability to, type or use a computer. So I was given the task of writing like a sample email within a time limit. And I think they were surprised when I could type 75 words a minute and,
Fantastic.
and completed the email with about like, I think 10 minutes remaining, and they gave me like 15. I think in those moments, I like to prove people wrong just to show them like disability, it may look different, but I can still complete the task that is given of me. So it really depends. And I think that's what got me hired on the spot. But
Fantastic.
yeah, I like to owe my quick typing speed to playing the piano because I've been playing for 15 plus years now. So I think that's helped me with my dexterity and my finger strength and that sort of thing.
What one thing do you want to leave the viewing audience with?
The one thing I always stress to anyone that I ever meet is asking questions about disability is okay. Disability is not a bad word. And as long as you ask respectfully, I'm open to answer any questions anyone has. Um, and I think it's better to ask a question than live and proceed with life in assumption, because when people function on assumption, they're creating a world that may not be true unless you challenge it, question, and inquire.
Hey, we're talking with Brandon Vera with Chris Cooley, Technology for Independence. Thank you.